So if my cat shows up, we might have to edit that out too.
Oh no,
Um,
people love cats on screen. That's
I
fine.
know, but usually by this time he's crawling all over me.
Hello, and welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I'm pleased to have with me back on the show again, Paul Turner. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming back and entertaining us once again with your profound wisdom. Paul is the owner of Darkside Cinema in Corvallis, Oregon, one of my favorite theaters of all time. I drive all the way from Salem just to go to his beautiful theater, and where you could be entertained by Paul's humor as well as terrific movies and lots of catchy sayings all over the walls. So it's worth it to go to the bathroom just to see some of the Blade Runner quotes on the walls at your theater. So, and a lot of the movies we're reviewing today, I think all of them actually either are currently showing at the dark side or showed there recently. So I'm excited to just jump right into it if that's okay with you, Paul.
Let's go.
Okay. Oh, and of course you're wearing your famous. I should have worn mine. I bought a dark side t-shirt, and yes, we suck less every day. So
Well, I got to
I
keep this
actually,
out of the way.
yeah, I know. I know you're growing your beard pretty long since the last time I saw you. Okay, well, let's start off with our first movie, which I'm super excited to review, Janet Planet. It's right now in theaters by writer-director Annie Baker. It's her directorial debut, but Annie Baker is apparently a really renowned playwright, and this is her first film. But it doesn't feel like a film made from a playwright in the perspective that it's not stagey at all. So don't worry about that. It's set in Western Massachusetts, and it follows a young girl named Lacey who's spending the summer at home with her mother, who's named Janet. And she is fixated by her mother. Her mother's a single mother, played by Julianne Nicholson, in a terrific performance. And Julianne Nicholson is one of my favorite underrated actresses, in my opinion. She's a great character actress. She's always fantastic in everything she said. She rarely gets lead roles. Her last movie I saw before this, she played Nicolas Cage's wife in Dream Scenario in a very underwritten role. And what this movie does so well is really puts us into this specific time and place. I felt like I was in the woods in Western Massachusetts in the early 90s among these characters, and beautiful photography. And the young girl who plays Lacey, I wrote down her name because I thought she was so good. Zoe Ziegler, first time, never been in a movie before. Absolutely fantastic performance by a child in a movie. I'm curious to hear what you said about it, Paul.
Um, all films don't have to be for everyone.
Okay, not for
Pardon
this
me
one is
while I,
not for you.
pardon me while I euphemize. So, there was a lot I appreciated about this film. It was shot in 16 millimeter film. And for those of us who are more, this is a new word, filmophilic, and appreciate that, then the thing that 16 millimeter does, and it's the photochemical rather than the digital, is that, in my opinion, um, film allows colors to have harmonics, whereas digital separates each color very definitively.
Mhm.
Film, movie film allows the colors to harmonize with each other, and for me, it creates a different feel. So in this movie, I very much enjoyed the fact that um, she chose to use this medium, which worked really well for the story. And I enjoyed that. And the details in the film were pretty amazing. I mean, everything from the fact that mom and daughter both had the two-tooth overbite. And
Mm.
little things like that really made the movie. And the more I researched it, the more I appreciated the amount of work that went into this film. Everything from the acupuncture that she was performing on Wayne, her first partner, was the acupuncture that's used for a hangover.
Hmm.
indicating very subtly, perhaps too subtly, that the problem with Wayne was alcohol rather than him just being, I got to censor this, right? I can't use my usual parlance, an idiot.
Yeah, yeah.
But so these details really worked for me. I enjoyed that quite a bit, and as you said, the Zoe and her mom were both incredibly involved in the story, and so there was a lot to like in this film.
It's probably not for everyone. And in fact, I just talked to a close friend recently who didn't like it. And her case, though, is that she had a childhood, let's say, where she related too much to it. She had a mother who was a little bit like Janet, maybe a little bit worse, actually, but and it was very uncomfortable for her. The mother is not she's not abusive. She's not a terrible mother in that way, but she is a narcissist. She's very self-involved. I mean, she keeps
Right.
getting involved in these bad relationships. And her daughter is just sort of watching. Her daughter is definitely the more mature one. I mean, at one point, the mother literally asks her, "What should I do about Wayne?" She doesn't even know how to
Yeah.
handle a bad relationship.
I think the word for that is parentizing a child.
Yeah, exactly. She's the one that's sort of parenting, if you will, in a way. And like all these people who seem to fall in love with Janet very easily, her daughter is also very much, kind of obsessed with her mother, always watching her. And then, but I think the movie as a coming of age story is sort of the character of Lacey gradually, and I think that's what to me, and I won't give away the ending. Some people really hated it, but I think it's her coming to the realization, like, oh, yeah, my mother is just this really flawed person who's going to keep making these mistakes over and over, and I kind of need to get over her almost, like need to
Mhm.
separate myself from her. And that's how I took the ending, at least. But it's a very specific place. The Annie Baker, the filmmaker, is from that area of Massachusetts, which I think plays a lot into it. It's definitely not the kind of upbringing I had, with kind of a hippie-ish, very upper white middle class type of background, and
Very
just
Eugene.
yeah, yeah, in a way, yeah. So I think that's its specificity, I think, will be. But I'm interested to see what Annie Baker does next. I'm curious to see what films she's going to do if she can get outside of this type of thing. Because of the look of the film, I thought it was actually really beautiful and the performances. So I recommend it. It's showing now, of course, locally at Salem Cinema as well as at your theater at the Darkside. And I think maybe not everyone will like it, but I am a sucker for good coming of age stories, and we're actually reviewing a couple, so that will be fun.
We have people leaving during this movie,
Oh,
uh,
really?
which is not a ringing endorsement. The I think the problems that I saw. So I'm one of these people that loves the um, pondering, meandering Asian films like Drive My Car and Perfect Days. So I do have the capacity to appreciate this type of filmmaking.
Hmm.
Um, what made this one I feel difficult for my customer base was that there is not a really likable character in this whole film.
Hmm.
And so the people don't engage. And the psychology and the sociology of the film is very interesting. And for a lot of people, that's going to be enough. But for my demographic that comes to the theater, I had a lot of them leaving, wanting to know if what they missed, was there something they didn't see. And of course, it's a very subtle film, as we know.
Hmm.
It goes, you really have to watch it, and if you disengage, you miss a lot. And um, so that was my feeling as well. I watched it last night, and
Hmm.
so that I have it fresh in my head. And I should have anyway. The I watched it last night, and I we were the only people in the auditorium except one other person, and that other person went to sleep. So
Oh, really?
so
What
yeah,
can I
there
say? I like slow movies, I guess. It is
I do
slower. I
too.
mean, it is
I
slow.
have the capacity to do this, and something else is that it is not a very masculine movie. This is
No, that's what I liked about it.
right, exactly. And it's dealing with a lot of the feelings of the female characters. And a lot of men are going to find that uncomfortable, if not boring. And so when I was watching it and I recognized that, I tried to disengage my, testosterone laced preferences and engage with it. But the thing that kept happening is I didn't like anyone. I mean, the kid was enchanting in her own way, but she annoyed the hell out of me by the end of
Hmm.
it. I raised girls, so that's probably where that comes from. It's like, oh yeah, I've been through this. But there is a lot to the movie. There is a lot to like, and you have to go in knowing that you're not going to get a car chase. And
Yeah.
if you understand that, the movie is very digestible.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. Well, let's move on to something else that also may not be as digestible to everyone, but I think one that you liked a lot more. So why don't you introduce the next movie, Paul?
So evil does not exist. Speaking of pondering Asian films, this is a film that takes its time getting to its point, and unlike Janet Planet, the characters are very relatable in a masculine and feminine sense, I feel. Um, After World War II, the Japanese government started meting out parcels of land for farmers to come in and grow so that they could contribute to the post-war effort of bringing Japan back, basically. And what happened is you have groups of people who communities, villages that have taken over these plots of land and have curated and nurtured them back into productive pieces of ground. So they have a real sense of ownership. They
Hmm.
really believe that this land is theirs, but they also have the continuity of the people who originally took over this land and started the work are still part of their community. They have become the community elders. And then you have people coming in from the big city who want to come in and create something on this land. They want to do a development, a gentrification that is completely inconsistent with the values of this land. And what you're seeing is a culture clash between part of the mechanism that was used to bring Japan back into the economic world and the economic world reaching back and essentially destroying that which provided them the sustenance to become what they are now. And so you have this conflict. And the story, There Is No Evil, is based upon the notion that in nature there is no evil, there's just survival.
Mm.
And the things that the instincts and the way we process that environment in nature is purely instinctual. And instinct is an intent, and is evil and evil is perhaps intent. So for me, this film asks that question, and it's beautifully rendered. I am not going to try to pronounce the director's name because I have enough trouble with English, and this is not English. But I felt that the thrust of the film is the more that you separate yourself from the natural world, the least the less capable you become to understanding how your actions affect that world and how the natural world will respond to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really a beautiful movie, as you mentioned. The photography alone, I think, would almost make it a four-star movie. I saw it at your theater, in fact, when it was showing there, and you were like one of the only theaters in Oregon showing it when it first came out. The director is Hamaguchi. I just say his last name because
Thank
that's the
you.
one part of it I can pronounce the best. And he did, of course, Drive My Car, which was nominated for an Oscar for Best International Film, and then came out with this one, which has not received the same amount of attention, I think, because it is so subtle. I'm not that Drive My Car wasn't, but I think people almost didn't know what to make of this movie because you have, like you said, this community living in this rural area, and then you have these people coming in, these city urban people, a man and a woman coming in from this company that essentially want to start a glamping,
Mhm.
which is, for those who don't know the word glamping, it is glamorous camping, like a glamping campgrounds for tourists on their land. And there is one man in particular who lives with his daughter out on that land who is very resistant to the idea. But it's not resistant in an American way. When they first have the town hall meeting, everyone's very polite. It's very
Yeah.
Japanese in that way. Everyone's very polite. And they're asking really intelligent questions like, what about the water? You know, you don't have enough water for the amount of people that you plan to have at these campgrounds, right? So they're
What
just
are you going to do
asking
with the
very,
deer trail? Yes, the
yeah,
deer trail is another concern. Yeah.
yeah, so they have real, because they know and are attached to the land, they have real concerns about it that are not just sort of the usual NIMBY, like, we don't want people here. It's like,
Mhm.
what about the water? What about the downstream runoff from the toilets that you're planning? Because you're building uphill. The people at the bottom of that, we're going to be getting the waste from your water, so they're asking these really intelligent questions. And I think it's interesting you mentioned in Janet Planet that there's, that a lot of people don't like it because there's not sympathetic characters here. Almost everyone is sympathetic, even to a degree. I think the two people particularly the two people that are
Yes.
not maybe the head of the company. We see him mostly on like a Zoom type call. He doesn't seem sympathetic. He's just like, throw more, give them some sort of breadcrumb and leave it
A
be.
little
But
pollution never hurt anyone.
yeah, exactly.
Well,
He has
yeah.
no sympathy. But the two people that work for the company that are really the worker bees that are asked to go down there and, try to convince these people to let them use the land, they're sympathetically portrayed, particularly the woman, because she's sort of like, well, I don't know. I think they have a point. She's kind of doubting. This was like a new
Yeah.
career change for her. She was a caregiver before that. She probably changed because she wasn't making enough money. She's just trying to get by. But there are some interesting twists in this movie that I think will really surprise and shock some people. That kind of gets back to what you were talking about first of all, the title of the movie, Evil Does Not Exist, which currently is a very provocative title in this day and age. And but also this idea of like, can nature be evil? So this idea of nature, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah. And I enjoyed that the city people had not had a lot of exposure to village life to the point
Mm,
where the male character from the city was actually given a lesson on how to chop wood,
yeah.
which was an amazing scene that I felt really furthered our perception of the divide between these two. Whereas it made the city person more of a poser than an actual woodcutter, if you
Right.
will. And the the village person saw that, and the city person was immune to it because
Yeah.
this was entertainment. This was something. This was quaint. This is not something that is in their orbit. And I thought that scene portrayed very well that these two are not in the same orbit. And
No, no.
I like
He
that.
gets all excited for chopping one thing of wood. He's like, "Yeah, I feel alive." And
Yeah.
the guy who lives there just looking at him like, "Yeah, I have to do this all day. Like this is
Yeah.
not like you're." He looks foolish when he gets so excited about chopping wood. But and I would be remiss to not mention the music. Because the movie was actually originally just planned to be kind of a music video for her music, a musician named Ishibashi, and the music's absolutely fantastic. And the movie is very quiet, as you mentioned. It's often just the music during some sequences. So really, I thought a terrific movie. Definitely so far on my top of the year list for some of the best films I've seen this year. So hoping people seek it out. I think eventually it'll be coming out on streaming. So I think it's out of theaters now mostly.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's move on to your next one, which is another coming of age story, very different from Janet Planet, though.
Yeah, slightly different. Just a little bit. So, um, coming of age in 1992 Chicago, in urban Chicago, an area that is not white. So you have two boys, I don't remember exactly their ages, but I'm going to say 11, who are moving in and out of this environment and living as kids do. Um, This is the age before internet, before a lot of the things that we take for granted now. And they use that to present the amount of imagination that is required for not only these boys to function within what could be described a hostile environment, but to thrive. and to grow and to become the people that they become. And I enjoyed that, first of all, as a concept, and secondly, how well that concept was portrayed. The two young boy actors were both amazing.
Hmm.
The story itself, I thought, was carried off very well. And it meanders, which I like. But there is a percussive moment that is violent that kind of brings home how those under Mayor Daley, how this particular population was treated. The urban black poor population was, of course, treated very poorly. Civil rights were and constitutional rights were basically discarded completely in the way they were dealt with. But these boys, we get to travel with their imaginations. We get to wave our observations intimately with how they feel and think and who they are. And I am taken by that. The ability for them to use their imaginations and the skill of the filmmakers to bring us along with that worked very well with me. Um, the characters, though sometimes one-dimensional, uh, played well into the story. And I found it very watchable. Other people I spoke to, one of the best things about what I do is when we have movies that no one has heard about, and they come out of the theater and they go, "Holy crap, that was amazing!"
Hmm.
Many years ago, we played Moonlight, which is perhaps slightly parallel to this film. And when no one had heard of it, and we brought it in just because it looked good. And no one saw it at first. And so we kept playing it. And after about 3 weeks, it started picking up. And then it did better. And then it did better. And then it won the Academy Award. And we ended up playing that movie for 18 weeks, even after it went to digital. I so hoped that would happen with this movie. It didn't quite go the same way, but I felt it was of the same caliber. And so for me, it was kind of revisiting a genre that is not generally accepted in Corvallis. Corvallis is very homogenous, and bringing in issues that have to do with urban poor black life generally does not do well in our town. The African American experience is not something that doesn't sell well in Corvallis. So when we did so well with Moonlight, I so hoped that this would follow in the same tracks. And I think one of the reasons it did not is it was subtle. And it
Hmm.
it isn't Janet Planet subtle, but it is subtle to the point where you have to actually watch the story. You have to understand what's going on, and you have to be able to sympathize with these kids making their way through that world.
Yeah. Well, and I would argue that marketing has a big part to do with that as well. The marketing campaign for Moonlight was the studio was on point on that. They really pushed the movie. I don't feel like this one got the same kind of push from its
Mhm.
studio. I would argue it's not as great of a film as Moonlight, but I also think Moonlight's a masterpiece. I did like We Grow Now. I didn't like it as much as Moonlight, but I can understand the comparison. I think what I liked about this movie is those relationships between the two boys. You don't see male friendships, true friendships. I mean, these two are thicker than thieves. They do everything together and not like getting into trouble. That's the thing you always see with like young black movies, like young black kids. It's like, oh, one's gonna grow up to be a hoodlum or whatever. That's like the stereotype. No, they're both thoughtful, smart, creative boys, and they're close friends, and they share feelings together. You never see that in movies about young children. Period. Any, especially boys, you never see it, but especially young black boys. You would think in most movies they don't even have feelings, and in this movie they talk about things. They talk about their feelings to each other,
Mhm.
what's going on, at home. And one of the kids is raised by his dad, who is a gruff character, who I think I couldn't tell if he runs the pizza place or if he just works there, but he always has his the pizza place that he works for, his shirt on, and he's very focused on money and trying to like keep a roof over their head, and then the other boy is raised by his single mom and grandmother in their home. And And all the characters are very sympathetically portrayed. I thought even the father of the other boy, who's played by Lil Rel Howery, who's a comedian in a dramatic role here,
Mhm.
at first is maybe you're like, oh, he's not so great. But then as it goes on, he's more sympathetically portrayed as well. He's
Mhm.
strict with somebody strict, I think because he's trying to protect him from the
Yeah.
streets, because they are living in this projects that interestingly, they showed that they talk about the history of this project at the beginning of the movie, that it was originally built after World War II for families, not necessarily black families, just families returning from the war. And then it turned into basically a black community as essentially as white flight happened in Chicago. People moved out to the suburbs. It became a mostly black community, but it was considered a very safe place, very, community oriented place to live for many years. And then into the 90s became more dangerous. And as you pointed out, some of the more really hard scenes to watch in the movie. The one in particular where the police come into their homes is really hard to watch because that's something that we know that African Americans have to deal with all the time, and uh, but it's still hard to watch the trauma that's happening to these families. So, oh shoot, we're running out of time. So I have a minute and 40 seconds left to talk about Thelma. So I think that should be easy though, because it's a very simple movie. So we'll move on. We Grow Now, great film. Seek it out. It is on demand and on streaming now. So people can check that out if they missed it in the theater. I'm going to go on to Thelma, which is pretty easy to describe. June Squibb, who's getting all the praise right now, who plays a 93-year-old woman who is scammed on the phone from someone trying to pretend to be her grandson. She sends the scammer $10,000. She's very angry that this happens to her, and she decides to pal up with her friend, played by the terrific Richard Roundtree, who I think is the best thing in the movie. And they get on his fancy motorized scooter through the streets of LA to go after the scammers to get her money back. Now, this movie is not a masterpiece. I'm not going to pretend it is. It's doing very well, of course, with a lot of the crowds because it's this 93-year-old feisty woman who is, it's a comedy. It's a light movie. It's a great summer movie, I would say.
Yes.
I had fun watching it in the theater. People were laughing. They were just having a great time. Paul, your 10-second review of this one.
Get ready to laugh. It portrays geriatrics in a kind and humorous way without making fun of them. The subtleties, again, I'm back to the details. Richard Roundtree's character having hearing aids that were colored for white people, and he's a very dark black man. Those details like that, and the conversations between the old folks, like, don't I know you? They've never met. So
Right.
for me, I love that.
Yeah, and I loved how they used the both of them have hearing aids. June
Yeah.
Squibb's character does too, and they use their Bluetooth to kind of carry out their secret mission together. So that part was fun. So it's a fun movie. To me, it's like a 3-star movie, but it's a lot of fun at the theater. A lot of people were laughing. So if you want to have fun, you want something less serious than the last 3 movies we reviewed, this is the one to see.
It's
So
also a movie to see with a crowd.
yes, yes, for sure. So better to see it in the theater. Okay, well, thank you very much, Paul, for being on the
Thank
show.
you.
Appreciate you. As always, have a great day and great movies. Goodbye.